About 2 weeks ago, when I was making visits at Crouse Hospital, I received a call to go to the maternity ward. A family was looking for an emergency baptism. And so I went up to the maternity ward and I did the baptism, and I talked with the young woman who had delivered this baby prematurely. And then I went to the waiting room, and a lot of the family members were gathered. But then somehow I got in a conversation with two men I knew from my work in other parishes. One happened to be the father of the young woman who delivered the premature baby, and the other one was the father-in-law of this young woman. And inevitably, we got talking about church. I can't seem to avoid it. I wanted to talk about the Big East, but they insisted on talking about church. And one said, the father of the girl said, "It's really wonderful. It's really great to see so many dedicated lay people involved in the various ministries of the church." He said it really has changed the face of the church, and it used to be such a clerical reserve, but he saw the church very healthy because it's so community-centered, so people-centered. But then he made an interesting observation, but he said, this is not the primary role of the laity. He said he happens to be friends with two men who are executives in multinational corporations, and they would like to be involved in church ministry, parish council, finance committee, facilities. They would have a lot to give. But he said there's no way they could possibly be at the meetings because they might be in the other part of the country when the committee meets. But he went on to say that if they have an impact on what these corporations are doing, then that is their role. When they attend to the integrity of the corporation, the quality of work, the corporate responsibility, that's their role. That's how they bring a leaven to society. That's how they bring the gospel values to their work. The other man said he considered himself a good Catholic, decent Catholic anyway, and he strives to live a very Catholic way of life, and I know he does. But he said, my participation in Mass lasts a little bit more than an hour on Sunday. And when the priest says, go, the Mass is ended, for me, the Mass is ended, period. He says the rest of the week, all 167 hours, belong to work, belong to what he called the secular world. So anyway, they were saying that the church has to find ways to help Catholics today leave Mass feeling that their daily lives at work and in the home are important to their faith. And so, in this homily, I want to explore some possibilities when it comes to what people call marketplace spirituality. You know, in the second reading, St. Paul was urging the Corinthians to be trustworthy servants, faithful stewards of the affairs at home, the community, the church. And in the gospel now, for 5 weeks, we have been reflecting on the Sermon on the Mount, the core of Jesus' teaching, the core of Jesus' instruction. And today, the gospel has more to do with the spirit of living out the teaching of Jesus. It has more to do with the spirit of doing the traditional acts, the traditional good works. You know, today the church makes a very important distinction when it comes to ministry. Lay ministry is that appointed or commissioned officially by the church, a parish council member, a music minister, a greeter, and so on. But this is really extraordinary ministry in the church. It's extraordinary ministry for the laity. It's fairly easily recognized as ministry, by the ministry, and others. It has its own rewards and recognitions, because sometimes, and it's very public, sometimes people wear a certain garb, they go through a special commissioning ceremony, they have a special decal, and the like. Ministry of the laity is the ministry of ordinary life flowing from our baptism, and you might say confirmation and Holy Eucharist, and serving those with whom we live and work. Generally, it's worked out in the world, performing our ordinary duties and responsibilities. It involves our family, neighbors, community, friends, co-workers, the world at large. And this is ordinary ministry of the laity. Everybody's involved with this. It is often not seen as ministry, service in response to a call, and it has its own rewards and recognitions, which very often are not public. This priest shared a conversation he had with a top executive he met of a large corporation while he was sitting next to him on a flight to Washington, D.C. And again, they're talking about church. It always comes around. And the top executive said that he was a Eucharistic minister and lector in his parish, very proud to be so. The priest asked him, well, what do you do for work? And he said, at this moment, I'm trying to establish this retirement program for my employees because Social Security could not promise a secure future. He said that he stressed excellence in all company services and products. And he said he tried to spend as much time visiting the various plants, getting to know the workers. The priest was really impressed, and he said to the top executive of this big corporation, he said, don't you call that ministry? Isn't that ministry? Haven't you thought about that as ministry? And the top executive said, well, I really haven't. Interesting. I have been using some examples here of executives, but, recognition has to be given to others, many others as ministers, parents, teachers, nurses, merchants, farmers, bus drivers, cooks. So often they are the salt and the light to the people around them, serving those around them, doing holy work by serving them, or just their mere presence. Pope John Paul II wrote this wonderful encyclical on human work. And he said, these are precisely the areas where lay people are especially competent to exercise their mission by bringing about the kingdom of God. This is how we can join he called it small lives, how we can join our ordinary lives and be joined in partnership with the creative purposes of God. The whole world is like an arena of faith. By changing the day of worship to Sunday, the beginning of the week, the early Christians made a very powerful statement that the faith community comes together not as an end in itself, but to prepare members for their week in the world. Sunday was not seen so much as a day of rest, a day of escape, but as a day of preparation for mission. In one of our churches, above the exit sign, as you leave the church, there's a poster which reads, "Now entering the mission field, return when you need reinforcements." It's almost like, we come together in church to celebrate how we found God in our work, our community, in our families. So today, we reflect again on the Sermon on the Mount, seeking the kingdom of God first and foremost, seeking the holiness of God. And we have to remember, we are people who have to be God-conscious and people-conscious. Persons for God, persons for others. People who are called in people who are sent.